As always, it is a privilege to be up here and get to preach God's Word. You can turn to John chapter 13. That's where we're going to be this morning in just a couple minutes. And that's on page 900 in the Pew Bible. If you'd like to use that, there's one in front of you if you don't have a Bible. But if you do not have one, also see me or any one of our members, and we would love to hook you up with a Bible of your own. Hope you'll find it's a necessity around here at Woolsey. It's the foundation of everything we do. We open it a lot. It's certainly the center of our gathering on Sundays. So I got a question for you as we get going. What is something that makes you tremble? Or when is a time when you would say that you've trembled in your past? Kind of that moment when the air seems to go out of the room and the weight just kind of settles. I thought about this past week, and there's not a ton of times in my life when I feel like this has happened. And there's a couple reasons for that, I think. One is just my personality. I think it's one that my wife would describe as something like a very dense rock. Like a lovable rock, but a rock nonetheless. Like one where stuff just kind of glances off me. I don't respond or react very strongly to a lot of things. So that might be part of the answer. And secondly, I just haven't had a lot of intense experiences, I think, compared to some people that I've heard in my life. And many of you know that I spent some time overseas, and you may think, what are you talking about? Like, wasn't that a life of adventure and excitement? And it really wasn't. It was a lot like here. Living here wasn't too much different, except we didn't have things like Chick-fil-A or air conditioning, both of which are really hard to live without. But I made it through. I made it back here, so I'm really grateful. But there were some times when I can't remember trembling. Like, I remember trembling in high school. There was a specific time when me and some friends were doing something in the middle of the night we weren't supposed to do. I lived in a dormitory, and my dorm dad walks in and discovers us, right? That's kind of like, whoa, the authority of that moment. And then I trembled the first time I went cliff jumping, right? You step to the edge, and I'm supposed to jump off this thing. That's a trembling kind of moment. Maybe a little bit every single time since then. I trembled when I had a really hard conversation with my uncle, and he had to reveal to me that my dad was not the man I thought he was. Like, my whole world seemed to kind of tip and shift in that moment. I trembled on my wedding day, like the weight of that my love for Anna Kelly, but also the weight of responsibility that was kind of hitting me right in the chest. And when I held each one of my girls for the first time, that was a weighty, heavy, trembling kind of moment. And so somewhere in the middle of all that, and I think we could all share similar stories, experiences, somewhere in the middle of all those emotions, the Bible actually calls us to tremble. I'm thinking of Isaiah chapter 66, where God says, "This is the one to whom I will look, he who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word." And I think, man, I've trembled in these scenarios, when was the last time I trembled at God's word? When was the time that shook me and just caused me to be silent and to grapple with the word of God? That's who God says, those are the ones that I'm going to look to. Those are the ones that are going to have a relationship with me if you're humble and you tremble at my word. And as I was reading John 13, considering this story that many of us know well, Jesus washing his disciples' feet, we've heard of that. But this should cause me to tremble. This is an astonishing picture, or should be. This is the God of the universe, the God who commands galaxies, if you will, is now found washing the scum off the feet of just some blue-collar fishermen nobodies. Like, what do I do with that? How do I tremble at the fact that this is the God I serve? This doesn't really make sense to me. But like many of you, I've been in church a long time, and this gets harder the longer you're in church when you hear the same stories over and over, and they don't shake you like they should. They don't have the power they were intended to when they were written down. And I hope this morning, and really I hope this every morning, right? Because every time we come together, we should hold this book up and tremble at it. That's what this is about, not us putting on a performance up here or me delivering to you something really that, a really great lesson for me to give you, but it's all of us together as God's people sitting underneath the weight of God's word and saying, what does this say, and what do we do with it, and how do we respond to this? That's hopefully what I will help us to do this morning, and is the theme of this whole series. Jesus, no other name. It's looking at the diamond of who Jesus is, if you will, the different aspects of his character, his humanity, his deity, what was he like, and we just all sit back and say, wow, what do I do with the God-man that came and showed me how to live? So I hope that by his Holy Spirit, he allows us to do that even this morning. So let's pray. I need his help to do that even as we consider this text. Lord, we put ourselves in your hands this morning. We thank you for your word, that we have the opportunity, Lord, to be shaped by it, to tremble at it, and thus be transformed. I pray that that would happen on a day-by-day basis. But even now, in the next few minutes, Lord, as we consider your word, would it change us? Lord, would you be with the hearts and minds in this room and be with my mouth as I speak? Would you guard it by your Holy Spirit? Would you reveal to us, Lord, the things that we may have looked at 1,000 times, but would you teach us something new about who you are and who we're called to be? In your name we pray. Amen. So Isaiah 66, God calls us to be, or he says he will look to those who are humble and contrite in spirit. What does that mean? I think Jesus shows us here in John chapter 13. He shows us exactly what that looks like. So I want to read the first 5 verses of chapter 13, if you'll read along with me. It says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments and, taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him." This is God's word. So Jesus makes this concept of humility real to us. He lived a life of humility, of humble service to other people. So the first point there in your outline is that Jesus demonstrated humility. He demonstrated it. He manifested it. He showed us what it looked like. The first verse there in chapter 13 stands as kind of an introduction to this whole section of John. This is chapter 13 is the beginning of what is often called the farewell discourse. This is the last night of Jesus' life, and he has a kind of a declaration of love and commissioning to his disciples. It's a unique section of Scripture. None of the other Gospels record things the way that John does. This story is actually unique to this book. But it's a declaration of love for his disciples. It's a beautiful description. I love that it says that he loved them to the end, right? It kind of hangs over his whole ministry. And it's really made more powerful by the fact that we know he's going to give his life the next day and that all his disciples are going to desert him. These are not men that reciprocated this love. He poured himself out to the very end, even on people that didn't always love him back. Author J.C. Ryle, writing on this passage, Chuck gave me a great book. It was one of those books that you're not going to pick up normally, but it was, oftentimes, like back in the 1800s, like I love the way some of those guys can write, and they use the English language in a way that is kind of a lost art, and I just was surprised at the depth of his reflection on this passage. But he talked about how the love of Christ for his own people here is something particularly precious. We often talk about God's love for sinners, and that's certainly true and good and right. It's the center of the gospel. But he said it's no less beautiful and true that God loves his own. He says that he should bear with all their countless infirmities from grace to glory, that he should never be tired of their endless inconsistencies and petty bickering, that he should go on forgiving and forgetting incessantly and never be provoked to cast them off or give them up. This is marvelous indeed. No mother watching over the waywardness of her feeble babe in the days of its infancy has her patience so thoroughly tried as the patience of Christ is tried by Christians. Yet his long suffering is infinite. His compassions are a well that is never exhausted. His love is a love that surpasses knowledge. That's so good. Like, we know, just like the disciples, we are not easy to love. We all stumble in so many ways. We frustrate God every day, but he continues to love us, and that is a beautiful truth to start out with and that hangs over this whole section. God declaring his love for people that don't deserve it. The setting here, as we see, is the Last Supper, the Passover feast. That's the context. This is the Jewish festival commemorating their salvation from Egypt, excuse me, where God sent the angel of death as the final plague. It passed over the Israelites as they slaughtered an innocent lamb. And little did the people in Jerusalem know that that Passover was going to be something incredible, as God offered himself as the Lamb of God, the new Passover lamb that would take away the sins of the world. And so mere hours away from this experience, right, the most gut-wrenching day in history, we don't find Jesus preparing in some sense or isolated. No, he's humbly serving his disciples even that last night. Now we're talking about humility, right? That's the theme of this morning. But the passage says love, and is there a connection there? I think there is. The statement I want to give you is that love is always an act of humility. That's what we see. Love is always an act of humility. And I mean two things by that. First, that great declarations or even great shows of love are empty apart from humility. Humility is seeking the interest of the other above your own. Unless you genuinely have concern for the good of the other at the expense of yourself, it's not really love. It's really just puffing yourself up, right? Our culture loves to make love about you. I just was talking with my sister and some tragic stories of marriages falling apart in her own life because that's what even in marriage people can do. It's about me. Are you meeting my needs? Are you fulfilling me? And I leave if that doesn't happen. And the Bible says, no, love is the opposite of that. It's getting your needs out of the way. It's getting your wants out of the way. It's not necessarily debasing yourself. It's not making yourself feel low. It's just thinking about yourself less and thinking about somebody else instead. So unless you're genuinely seeking the good of another, love is empty. And number two, another aspect of this is that love is sometimes an emotion, but it's always an action. It's always an action. Love has to be acted out. That's why it's a humble act that we see Christ living this out. Sometimes you're going to feel love for someone else. Like sometimes we can define love as romantic feelings or feelings of attraction for someone. But those things are going to come and go. But if you do not back up those feelings of love, of emotion with action, it's not really love. And so we see that, and if we do that, if we do just express feeling or feel something for someone, it's again just kind of like a veiled a veiled kind of ego boost of like, I feel this and I feel better about myself. And the devil loves to sneak our self-centeredness into even our acts of love for other people. And speaking of the devil, see what I did there? In verse 2, he comes up. We see that he and Judas are already working together, right, to plot against Jesus. But despite his treachery, I think we see in verse 3 that Jesus has this well in hand, right? He knows how this is all going to play out. Judas actually poses no threat to the plan of God. And there's an incredible contrast drawn out here I want you guys to see, that Jesus knows all things, including that God has given him the victory, including how all this is going to play out, including Jesus' heart and intention. But rather than like smite him on the spot, which you might expect, he could just snap his fingers and boom, Judas is gone. He serves Judas instead. I don't know if I ever really reflected on the fact that Jesus washes Judas's feet here. He kneels at Jesus' feet the same as the rest of the disciples. He serves his enemy. And so there's this incredible contrast of character that Judas is a completely powerless, pitiful kind of character who's grasping for some sense of power. And Jesus has all power and all knowledge and all authority, and he lays that aside to serve even his enemy in that moment. And that's an incredible picture. Just a brief side note here, just on the character of Judas, that I think should be kind of a red flag for us. Note what deep corruption can be found in the heart of even the most religious. Look how corrupt Judas was. When he walked, he was closer to Jesus than many of us are a lot of the time, right? He walked and talked with him. He heard right out of Jesus' mouth. He had he had a relationship with Jesus, and yet his heart was far from him. And it's scary that that's possible, I think, and it should make us very vigilant to root out hypocrisy in our own hearts. When that's possible, you can go really far in head knowledge, you can go really far in religious practice, and still be far from Christ. And Judas shows us that. And part of humility is admitting that we're more like Judas here than we are Jesus, right? That's a helpful Bible study tip. If you're ever reading the Bible and you're like, wow, Jesus really reminds me of me, you're reading the Bible wrong. Like, that's not the character you're supposed to identify with. Right? It's Judas. Even as corrupt and messed up as he is, you're supposed to see yourself in him. Like, I do that. Like, sometimes my hand's in the money bag. I have my foot in worldliness while I'm also trying to follow Jesus. Like, we do that all the time. And the difference is not that we're of a different quality than Judas. It's that we can choose to accept the love of God that he rejected. Even on this last night, God is still offering him a chance to repent. He could have, as Jesus is washing his feet, he could have broken down and embraced Christ finally, but he didn't. And that's why he's condemned. So let's not make his same mistake. So the God of all power, of knowledge and wisdom and glory, dresses himself like a slave, we see in verse 4. What is going on here? I want to paint the picture as best I can. This is such a powerful image. This is what caused me and should cause us, I think, to tremble. And I think the disciples most definitely were trembling in this moment, if you catch the context. So it was customary in those days to wash feet before dinner because your feet are nasty, right? That's just how it goes when you wear sandals and flip-flops out in the dirty, dusty roads. If you've ever been on a mission trip, a lot of you guys might have like worn sandals in a third world context, and your feet are like black at the end of the day. You're like, what? Like, I don't even know what all this stuff is. It's disgusting. So, of course, they needed to be washed, and these are low tables with pillows around them. They're reclining at the table, so your feet are like in your neighbor's face, so that makes it even more important that you wash your feet. And so most likely here, this is speculation, but I thought it was kind of interesting to maybe tie the story together. Like, somebody most likely would have washed Jesus' feet, because as dishonorable as it was to wash feet, even like not even Jewish slaves would often do that. If you had a Gentile slave, it was his job because it was like the worst of the worst. But it would have been a bit of an honor to wash Jesus' feet. Somebody would have probably done that for him. So Peter, one of the elder disciples, would have washed Jesus' feet. They sit down. But then Peter expects the next guy, to wash his feet. And then the next guy, and then the next guy. Everybody sits down, and no one's washed each other's feet. And we actually find out from Luke chapter 22 that they get into an argument, remember this, about who's the greatest. Like, that's what they're arguing about. And I thought, like, maybe it was prompted by this. Like, you should wash my feet. Oh, heck no, you should wash my feet. Like, and they're just arguing about who should wash each other's feet. And in the midst of that, Jesus just kind of quietly stands up, and he moves over to the table, and he starts to dress himself, take his robe off, put the towel on. And one by one, the disciples start to realize and kind of fall silent, like, oh, shoot, what's he doing? Oh, I should have done that. That should have been me. Why are we, like, it's all kind of hitting them at the same moment. They're kind of embarrassed and shocked and dumbfounded. This was unheard of in that culture. Different people might take this responsibility like we see, but a superior never washes the feet of an inferior. That just would not happen. So they're sitting there dumbfounded by this. Their master serving them as a slave. And I hope we can feel the weight of this. I tried to bring it into a 21st century context. It was hard because we don't have a parallel situation. But, I mean, think of Jesus or just someone of high standing coming to your house for dinner. And, the day's gotten away from you and, like, you've neglected some stuff. So there's, like, dirty dishes in the sink. The counters are nasty. Like, there's some laundry on the floor. And you feel really bad about it. And, your family, you just end up kind of bickering over whose job this was. And why didn't you pick this up? And you should have done that. And Jesus comes over and he starts doing the chores. He starts washing your laundry and doing your dishes. And you're like, whoa, like, you shouldn't have to do that. You feel kind of shamed and embarrassed that he would have to do this. But he says, no, I'm glad to. I want to. I enjoy serving you in this way. Just the weight that you would feel that I'm not worthy of this. I'm not worthy of you serving me like this. And that's exactly how Peter reacts, right? He comes to Peter, and Peter says in verse 6, Lord, do you wash my feet? That's the emphasis. Do you wash my feet? No, may it never be. This doesn't make any sense. And Jesus tenderly responds to him that what I'm doing now you do not understand, but afterward you will. Like, just calm down, Peter. He's saying two things here. I think one, you just wait. You're going to understand in a minute. But also, you're not going to fully understand until after the resurrection, right? The disciples are still understanding the full role of Jesus, and now we know that his whole ministry was culminating in him being a servant on our behalf. But Peter can't help himself, right? May it never be. Would you never wash my feet? I have so much love and respect for you. It's what it's motivated by. Peter often gets a bad rap, but can't we relate, right? Jesus is doing your dishes. You would be the first to stop him and say, no, you don't have to do that. But he responds with a lesson. There's no rebuke for Peter here. There's just a lesson. Let me show you what this means. So the first response we should have to this story, number one, is to receive it. Response number one is to receive it. Jesus answers him, if I don't wash you, you have no share with me. You're not one of mine, Peter, if you don't have the kind of attitude that allows me to serve you. Because that's another maybe part of humility that we don't often grasp. It's not just serving others. Humility is being willing to be served. It's not just serving others. Like, we have to lay down our pride enough to let someone else serve us. And that, I feel like that kind of rubs us wrong as Americans, right? We're self-made. We don't need charity, right? We got this. But Jesus is saying, if you don't accept my charity, then you have no part with me. You're stuck in your pride. You're without hope if you think in any sense that you can do this yourself. If you think you can clean yourself, you're already lost. And that's scary. If we in turn, just like Peter, don't come and submit to being washed by Christ, say, I'm helpless, I need you, then we have no part or share or lot with Christ. Jesus is the only one who can cleanse. It's clear that he's using this as an illustration for something more than just feet, right? We have dirty minds and dirty hearts and dirty souls that we cannot even begin to clean, that Jesus cleans for us. He is the only one who can do that. So Peter, of course, is all in. He swings hard the other direction. Gotta love Peter, right? Lord, not my feet, but also my hands and my head. Clean all of me, please. If there's any possibility of me being cut off, do whatever you have to do. But Jesus calms him down again. Calm down, Peter. Take it down a notch. The one who is bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean, and you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him, and that's why he said, not all of you are clean. So you've already received the greater cleansing, he said, right? It's where it's clear that he's talking about things of salvation here, because not all of Judas had not been cleaned. His feet might have been cleaned in that moment, but his heart and his mind were certainly not. But Peter's were. And so he reassures Peter, you are clean. And I think some of you need to hear that this morning. This is a powerful truth. That if you've come to Christ and you have been washed by his blood, that is once and for all, you are 100% clean. You not only are clean, you can feel clean and be clean for the rest of your life, for eternity, that God loves you. You are objectively accepted and loved and embraced and valued. No matter what you've done or what you will do, it doesn't matter what's been done to you. I mean, that plays a part a lot of times in why we feel unworthy and dirty and affected by the scum of this world. And God says, once I clean you, you are clean. Every day you can stand in the security of knowing that God loves you and you are 100% clean. And I love that truth, that we can not only be clean, but feel clean in his presence every time we come to him. And that's what he's reassuring Peter with here. And I pray that for some of you, God speaks that to you through this passage, to hear him say, you are clean. You have no need to come back again and again to be washed completely. Only your feet. And he says that because, the illustration is like you take the bath, you take the shower, and even if you were able to keep your whole body clean, which we know that you can, your feet still get dirty, right? You still have to hit the floor and you walk through the day, and we still get into sin, we still get into mess, we still get into all kinds of stuff every day. And Jesus says, that's the only part you need to clean. It's not a full cleansing. We can get those things confused. This isn't like you don't need to come and receive salvation again, but we do need to come to another washing that Christ gives us. And this is an incredible truth for us here, church, that Jesus is still in the business of washing feet. He wants to wash your feet. He will still wash your feet every single day if you'll come to him. He cares enough about you, to the scum that has been stuck to your foot from the day before, he'll wash it off and he'll make you clean and he'll set you again on the next day. This is the daily habit of confession and repentance, renewal in his presence, right? Prayer before him. I read in 1 John 1:10 last week that if we say we have not sinned, we make him a liar and his truth is not in us. To be humble is to admit, yes, I'm sinful. Yes, every day I get into stuff that I should not. Admit that readily, quickly before the Lord. And then the previous verse says that if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins. That's the cleansing. And then to cleanse us from all unrighteousness going forward. It is possible in the Christian life to be free from unrighteousness. Every day you can be washed, both your head to your toes. You can be clean again in Christ because he's willing to wash you. One of the biggest insights in the Christian life, in my Christian walk recently, has been that prayerlessness is pride. Prayerlessness is pride. If we don't do the work of coming before God and humbly admitting our dependence on him, that's an act of arrogance. That's saying we don't need him. If you neglect the discipline of coming before God, your quiet time, call it what you will, your time before God in prayer and with God's word every day, if you neglect that, it's an act of pride in saying that I can clean myself, I can justify myself, I don't need this daily cleansing. And what really blew my mind about this week, that kind of caused me to tremble, was what does it mean that the God of the universe, just as he knelt down and washed his disciples' feet, he's willing to meet me in my living room and do the same thing every day. The God who has who knows how many things to be concerned about, the God of galaxies, again, will meet me in my living room, and he'll walk through, like he'll wash me of the fact that the day before I was on the couch and I was lazy and I said a harsh word to my wife. He'll wash me of that, and he cares about my dumb little problems, right? Why would he care about me and my little situation? But he's there, and he'll meet me every single morning. Why am I neglecting oftentimes this incredible privilege and this God who's willing to wash my feet? So that's the first response. We have to receive this on both those levels. We need to come to him and be clean, be washed, and we also need to come to him with our dirty feet every single day and let him wash them for us. But there's another response that we need to, that he makes clear. If God is willing to serve me to this extent, I need to be willing to serve others. This has an impact on my relationships with other people. So response number 2 is to give it. If we receive it, now we give it. Receive it and give it. As we've received, so we give. And that comes through quite clearly in verses 12 through 17. It says, when he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, and you also should do just as I have done to you. Truly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. I love how crystal clear this section is, right? Not a lot of explanation needed. As I've done, so you go and do. There's no room for exceptions. There's no room for disobedience. And that would be challenging by itself, but the last verse really helps us to see this isn't meant to be a guilt trip that we just go and feel bad about how we're not like Jesus, because we aren't in so many ways. But the motivation, the reason, isn't out of obligation. We've all been there, right, where we serve somebody just because we feel like we have to, like we begrudgingly do it. And that's not at all in obedience to this text. Verse 17 says, no, we do it for joy. We do it for the blessing that comes if you live this out. Blessed are you if you know and understand and behold this picture, and then you live it out. There's a blessing that comes with that. That's a rich biblical word there. It means happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction. Happy is the one who not only hears and sees, but does, but puts these things into practice. Your life is only going to get better as you give and give away like Christ. The world has it wrong, Jesus says. We all know that there is a particular pleasure in being served, right? That's enjoyable. So much of the world is built on offering that to us. But Jesus says there's a greater pleasure, a greater joy if you will give. There is so much you will discover. There's so much more you will unlock about the joys and the way life is meant to work if you will spend your life giving rather than taking. There's so much to be found there. And verse 16 has always stuck with me too as I've read it. Jesus kind of uses a logical argument here, which I really connect with, right? If I'm your master and I've gone here, well, where did that put you, right? Beneath me. If Jesus has gone low, then we're called to go lower. Always. There's nothing that I can say now. If Jesus has stooped to this direction, there's nothing I can say is beneath me. There's nothing I can say, well, I'm just not really called to do that. No, I'm called to go lower. I'm called to always do things that are uncomfortable, that I don't feel like doing, that don't seem like they're my job. No, I happily, gladly do them because my Lord has gone down there, and I want to be found beneath him, not above him. And that's always been super challenging to me, and that really helps clarify a lot of things. Do as I have done, Jesus says. It's really as simple and as radical as that. But does this mean that you should start taking off your neighbor's socks and like, washing them and rubbing lotion on them? No. Please don't do that. I think it would be lost on most people that you did that for, although in the church, I know this can sometimes be a helpful illustration. But what I think it does mean is, how can we find ourselves doing unexpected things for people to where it's a surprising blessing to them, right? To your neighbor, like offering to watch their dog or to water their plants or just to bring them gifts that they don't expect or see coming. I think we need to brainstorm these unexpected, unsolicited, unnecessary acts of kindness that we as Christians can be marked by and known for. We need to come up with creative, weirdly generous gifts that we give away. People are like, why are you doing that? And why would you do that? We should shock people with how we live. That a way that forces people to say, no, you don't have to do that, like we would have done with Christ, right? They said, no, that's not your job. Which I think I've learned in Southern culture when someone says, you don't have to do that, it really means, I'm really enjoying you doing that. Please continue to do that. That's what that means. So we should hear that a lot, right? We should do things that people don't expect us to do. One of your talk it over questions in your bulletin involves brainstorming ways with each other. We need to bounce off each other and creatively think, how can we engage people? I got to listen in on a Zoom call this week it was totally focused on what are some fresh ideas for reaching out to your neighbors as the sun's coming out, the weather's getting better, what are some things you can get at the dollar store. It was really helpful just to bounce off some other believers that are doing this well. So the foster care opportunity that we have in the lobby is a great way to do this. It's a great way that it's not just having a kid come and live in your home. There are tons of other ways that all of us can plug in and involve and serve and give to people that can't give back to us. That's one of the hearts of this as well. And Connect Camps, as was mentioned. How can we as a church reach the people in our community and serve in ways, give time out of our week, take vacation time maybe to serve at a camp, like things that are uncomfortable, but that are going to result in greater joy. Jesus will go on later in this chapter to explain that this new commandment of love, this is a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. He says this is meant to mark us as Christians. This is how they will know who his representatives are. Jesus is preparing to leave, and so he's like, let me define the parameters. If you're going to represent me, if you're going to stand in my place in the world, this is what you need to look like. John 13:35, I think we have that verse on the screen. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. That's how they're going to see you coming, is if you have love, if you're humbly serving in these ways. One encouraging aspect of this is that I don't think we're going to get a lot of pushback on this initially, at least, right? Christianity is under fire in our culture. That is a fact. It's only getting worse. But while people can be offended and will be offended by a God of wrath who calls them to repent and turn from their ways and things that we cannot budge on, like God's definition of marriage and the sanctity of human life, there is no campaign against selfless love and kindness for people. No one's got a placard saying, stop being kind to me. It's not going to happen. And I mean, there's no one against gift giving, no one against being a helping hand. There's no one against kind words being spoken. And this is how we're going to win the world, church. This is the strategy. He says they'll know you by your love, not necessarily what you stand for or what you stand against. Do we proclaim the gospel? 100% yes. Is this going to lead to those hard conversations eventually as people grapple with what it means that there's a God in heaven? Yes, but we don't start there. We start by these humble acts of service. That's how we draw people in. That's how we begin the conversation. It's by your love that they will know you. That's what Jesus said. So Rosaria Butterfield is a current writer who's championing what I would call the transformative power of simple neighborly love or hospitality. I brought her book with me this morning. I would highly recommend it, called The Gospel Comes with a House Key, which is just her concept of we have a house. This is an incredible way we can serve people around us. I was just challenged by her and her husband's lifestyle of just having people over all the time, serving people, watching her neighbor's cats, walking the dog, whatever it takes to get into people's lives. And she's so passionate about it because she was transformed by it herself. Back in 1997, Rosaria was an LGBTQ activist and academic who fiercely opposed Christianity, was writing against it, was composing a book on it. And she said, as a serious academic, I knew if I was going to write a book, I needed to get to know my subject. I needed to understand a true believer and read the Bible. And so she reached out to a pastor who had actually invited her to dinner, she said, through the kindest piece of hate mail that she'd ever received. I thought was kind of funny. He had written critiquing her and said, by the way, come over for dinner. And she was like, what in the world? But so she went, and she talked about, man, from that first moment, that first encounter, God began to change her heart. God began to show her what a Christian actually looked like, blew up all of her expectations. She said, writing of that first night, nothing about that night unfolded according to my confident script. Nothing happened the way I expected. Not that night or the years after or the hundreds of meals or the long nights of singing and prayer as other believers from the church and university walked through the doors of that house as if no door was there. Nothing prepared me for this openness and truth. Nothing prepared me for the unstoppable gospel and the love of Jesus made manifest by the daily practices of hospitality undertaken in this one simple Christian home. That's the picture, church. That's how we change the world, by being simple, hospitable, service-oriented in the way we live in our neighborhoods, in our homes, in our relationships, and we demonstrate the love of Jesus to the world. We show them what Jesus looked like, and then we tell them about who he is. So I exhort you, as my brothers and sisters in the room, as those who have been given much, richly blessed by God, gifted and resourced with everything you need. You have everything needed for life and godliness. Many of us, dare I say, most of us have worldly riches to spare, but all of us have heavenly riches beyond measure. You have the unstoppable gospel of Jesus. You have that and you know it. You know the power of it. You've been washed once and for all. You are clean from now until eternity, and you have the ability to daily deal with sin. You have Christ before you, Christ behind you, Christ above you. He's leading you. He's with you to the end of the age. So what you have, go and give it freely. Give excessively. Give without measure to those around you, that they might know this generous God that you serve. Let's be the church that Christ commissioned us to be, and so find the abundant life that he promised. And to any this morning who have never come to Christ, let me just simply say, come and join us in this. This is the only way to live. There is so much more to life that you're missing out on. And I would love to talk with you more about what it looks like to be washed and then commissioned and sent out to be this life-giving force in the world. So let's pray. And as we sing this song again, I really love this song that Matt sound. I love whoever wrote that song. I'm really thankful. I feel like they were meditating on this text. But let's sing that song again as we meditate on our humble King and how do we model this and live this out in our lives. Let's pray. God, we are so challenged by your word. I pray that it would cause me to tremble even now as I think about it the rest of today and this week, that you kneel at my feet every single day in service to me. Even as I bow before you, you still come and serve me. And I pray that would lead me to serve others, that would lead me in my joy, Lord, to find applications in the way that I conduct my schedule and my work and my kids and my weekends and my leisure time, that I would find how to make this my life song, Lord, of modeling and displaying you to the world. Would you grow our church as a beacon of light in a dark world? In your name, amen.